I think we should just get started. And then as people will file in, they'll see the phase 2 of the presentation, basically. So phase 1 and phase 2 is a really loaded concept because a lot of people think about it in different ways. And one of the ways that I've been thinking about phase 1 and phase 2 kinds of approaches is if you're, as a product manager, after making a decision to add a feature or to build a product in a phased approach, chances are you're going to be talking about that almost every day. That's a good sign that you have actually done what I'm going to be talking about, which is the phase 1, phase 2 approach. There was a blog post, I don't know, 10 years ago or so called The Myth of 2.0. Does that ring a bell with anybody? So the myth of 2.0 is you plan for something and then you never actually get to phase 2. So you push everything that is hard to do into 2.0, and you have it all in your notes, and you're going to do it that way, and then 2.0 never even happens. So that's been something that's been on my mind. It's a little bit of a stale kind of concept because nowadays, with phase 1 and phase 2 approaches, we've entered a new era of it. MVPs are everywhere, that sort of thing. So that's what we're going to be talking about, and I'll, in the first few slides, just kind of talk about that in a little bit more depth as well. So does anybody know what we're looking at here? What city?
Boston.
The Boston. Now I just realized it says Boston, Massachusetts in the upper left. I didn't notice it until. Okay, so it's a project. What did they call this? It was like the Big Dig. Yeah. So.
Or it also was called the Depression of the Central Artery. that was its really official name.
And this took at least 5 years, right?
It was like 17, I think.
What?
It took a really long time.
Okay. Yeah. So this is how a lot of, in my experience, venture capitalists think of a phased approach is phase 1, phase 2, right? And phase 2 has a lot of new things and massive changes that happen, in that process. And we as product managers know that it takes us, we have to build out what we're doing per quarter a lot of times. And it's not this simple. There's a lot of little things, and if we were building our product roadmap for 3 years, there would not be 1, 2. It would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 even, that kind of thing. So the reality is that, we have to plan in a lot more depth than just 1, 2. And the irony here is that so did the people in Boston. But this was what everybody understood what was happening, but there were a million things that they had to do to make these new freeways that went out over the ocean and all kinds of things like that. So, so that's kind of part of the subject here. And the gist of what I pitched when I pitched the session was we're going to cover, are there best practices with a phase 1, phase 2 approach? And by that I mean a scenario where a product has features A, B, and C in 2018 and adds features D, E, and F in 2019. It's that kind of thing. And we'll get into some tangents, and we'll talk a little bit about MVPs and things like that. But that's the main topic of what we're going to discuss here. And so, high level, we'll discuss some examples of phased approaches, whom to consider when phasing, why you're doing a phased approach, when to use one, when not to use one. So just really simple there. And as we go through this, I am totally okay with us pivoting the topic. If we get off on a tangent while we're on a slide, that's fine. So if you guys want to give examples or say I'm in this kind of situation and how should we do that, we can do that as well. So about me, I am from Utah. I'm probably the only person here from Utah. I'm probably the only person in 5 years from Utah that's come to ProductCamp Silicon Valley. I present at ProductCamp Austin a lot, and there's another person here named Alicia Dixon who also goes on the road and presents at product camps, and she'll be presenting this afternoon. So Nils is going to as well. Anybody else going to present this afternoon? Or? Okay. So Nils I think you're a lock. You're going to have a session this
It
afternoon.
looks like I got enough votes, I think. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm a roadie, so I come on the road here. I work for a company called Avid Exchange. None of you guys are buyer personas for my product, so I'm not pitching my company. You can look up what we do, but you wouldn't buy it. So what we do is payment and invoicing solutions embedded in NetSuite.
My company is just down the street from NetSuite, literally.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
In San Mateo. I mean, they have a big building and we have a smaller building.
I'll probably be in your neighborhood soon.
Okay.
Yeah. And then my past work, I've released 1 million products. Most of them are mobile apps. I have tons of mobile apps out in the wild.
Aren't you a librarian at heart?
I'm a librarian, yes. That was my career path for a while. Then I worked for a library software company, which was a natural transition. And then somehow I got into payments in NetSuite. So I don't know how that happened. But, okay, so examples of a phased approach. This is one that was just kind of on my mind. And I actually had like 10 different examples, and I thought to myself, I need to dial it back a little bit. So I'm going to show like 2 kinds of examples of companies using a phased approach, and then we'll talk about other examples that you guys can think of. So Robinhood, who needs a lesson on what Robinhood does? Okay, so Robinhood is a stock trading app, and really good, pardon the stereotype, for millennials, because it allows you to test without committing to $10 per trade. It's free per trade. So it's a great product for somebody that's just kind of learning how to lose money in the stock market. So core competency, and this is actually my app, so I apologize for that. So like these are some stocks that I'm following, and you see like one's in red for the day and the other ones are green for the day. And so I'm following them and I'm getting notifications that are saying, hey, this stock is down 5%, kind of triggering me to buy more of that stock. This stock is up by 10%, triggering me to sell that stock. So I'm following those, and this is kind of what Robinhood was made to do. They're very successful. Let me just put that out there. They're doing a good job. They probably have sufficient funding. There's no reason for them to pivot. You go into the details of a particular stock, superior uniform. So this is a day where it's just going up and down based on Trump's tweets probably. It just goes up and down all day. And then you see at the very bottom, there's this button that says trade. So then you hit the button that says trade, and you have 2 options. And by the way, this will be a stale presentation in a month because they'll change how these buttons look. But you have an option of sell or buy. Okay, really straightforward. You know what your action is. So you basically have that search menu. You have details, and then you have actions you can perform on the details. So then they decided to add, this is like a big roadmap item, Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, completely different kind of scenario, right? I don't know if there's a concept of free trades. They're probably trying to figure that out themselves. They're probably in meetings, just the entire week about how do they get into Bitcoin. So they release their Bitcoin features. Bitcoin, literally, they put it above the stocks in the app. It's right there in front of your face. So, and it's following, there's like, cryptocurrencies, there's like 20 different kinds of cryptocurrencies. So this is just like 6 of them, and you can see the stocks are down there. So the things that I'm really doing are down at the bottom. And I'm going to show you what I can actually do with Bitcoin. Okay, so this is my Bitcoin details page. Slick UI. It looks way more intense than the other UIs. It's showing me these crazy, up and down patterns of Bitcoin's, values. And then, what can I do on this page? What are my actions that I can actually perform on this page? Can I buy Bitcoin? Can I sell Bitcoin? What actually can I, invite friends. I'm on the list. It says I'm on the list over 1 million people in line when they actually have this feature available. So they put Bitcoin above their core competency in their mobile app. It's sitting right there in front of people. They're committed. Like, this isn't an MVP, I don't think. They are seriously going in this direction. They're impacting their user experience. They're committed, but they're not ready. They don't, like, a lot of us would not have released this Bitcoin feature. Who among us thinks, like, off the top of their head, they would have done exactly what Robinhood did as a product manager? Okay, I'm making an assumption. I'm like challenging you guys to defend Robinhood on this. But, you know, clearly there were some people at Robinhood probably that thought this was a good idea, and there were people that didn't. So in the end, this is what they did. So they have phase 1, and then phase 2 is, obviously, you can buy Bitcoin. That's the next phase. But we're not there yet. We're right in the middle. So this is kind of an example that was on my mind because I have to look at the Bitcoin things every day when I open the app. So here's another example, and I pulled down a whole bunch of roadmaps, and this is Microsoft. This is a financial system, and it's Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains. And you see all of these things in their roadmap about 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0 and things like that. So obviously, they're doing this like phased approach with just about everything as well. So, so this is kind of their concept of doing a phased approach. And I had some other examples. I had examples from my own product and things like that. You guys realize that, you know, Apple and Android and things like that are constantly using phased approaches as well. But I wanted to open it up. What are some other examples that you guys can think of the phase 1, phase 2 kind of approach that companies are using?
We've seen a lot of freemium kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. They have something free that's basically backed by investors. Right. And then phase 2 is how do we make money? Right.
That's a really good point. And that's not exactly an MVP when you do a freemium model. It's you probably have decided to do something that you have a commitment for. You probably can't get around it. You're going to have to do something at some point to make money off of that thing. Right.
Even Robinhood, on their examples, for the first, 3-4 years, they didn't have a desktop version.
That's right.
And even the desktop version is only in beta now, which I think goes against the traditional way of thinking about launching products. Yeah. Especially something like buying stocks, right?
Yeah, I mean, so that mobile app that we just showed, it's really confusing, or it was a year ago. Like, you can't even go to the web, and then they finally released the web version, emailed every one of their customers about it, and you went there, and what did you kind of experience? It's really scaled down, isn't it? It's like 75%.
Yeah, I think the one surprising thing about the mobile app is like that's where you got your tax documents at the end of the year. Like there was no place to go online to get the tax documents.
That's right.
Yeah, the web versions that's still being built out.
Yeah. No, that's a great example. I actually should have done a live demo of that web interface. It's actually something when you look at it. And you know what though? It's a perfectly stable product too. Yeah. So it's not like it was. It's not like phase 1 isn't a tested product. It's not like it doesn't perform well, and there's like a lot of things that need to be done from a dev perspective. It's not feature rich necessarily. And same with the Bitcoin one that we showed you guys.
I'm in the middle of a launch too, and phase 1 is really more all the back-end plumbing's working with the minimum set of will it work for us to test it internally, and then really phase 2 is the real MVP that the customer's going to be playing with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you know, I'm focusing on the phase 1, phase 2, but like there could be a phase 6, right? There could be a lot of things. There's another keyword that's come up, like I think somebody coined it in the past year or two, Big Bang. Big Bang is like the alternative to doing this, or it's the big one.
It's pretty old actually in the IT world.
It is? Okay. Okay. when you Google Big Bang, you get lots of things about the TV show. So I don't really know that you are getting.
Cosmology.
Yeah.
Another example where the phase approach really works really well, of course, is Amazon.
Mhm.
Starting off with books and music, and even Jeff Bezos was saying at the time, well, we're not profitable yet, and we don't plan to be profitable in books and music. We plan to get into everything else. And everyone said, oh, yeah, right. And now look at them, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And they actually do that with Amazon Web Services a lot too, where like, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but there's a subset feature or product called Glacier under Amazon Web Services that was released in a sort of viable way, and then they built it out over the years. So their roadmap probably was 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 kind of thing.
I think of phases as you release something that's clearly not done but has a use case that works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh, here's a new module. That's not really a phase, right? That's just a new module. And so, and I've certainly seen it stall a lot. At my last company, we released a mobile app that was limited in functionality with the idea that we would put more functionality out, and it never did while I was there. I don't know what's happened since, but that was a phase one still.
Right.
Phase one.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's used for testing. So we also, part of the reason we didn't put much more effort into it is that people didn't use it. So phase one is another way of finding out if it's really an important thing to do.
Yeah. And we'll get into the role that usage plays into a phased approach. Because like the Robinhood example that we gave, clearly they're getting usage. There's no way around it. You have to be using this feature. So they must be getting feedback and information off of this. And there's other things where your phase one could be something that's unusable or unsellable or something like that. And that's what a module often is. Like, yeah, good point. So I think we've been focusing a lot on market and users. There are other reasons to do a phased approach that are beyond that. And this could have gone in a very different direction based on who attended. We could have been talking all about what a dev needs to build. And if it's too big, how do you break it up, right? So there's a lot of other things to consider. We talked a little bit about what current users experience. Operations. Okay, so incremental benefits on an operational feature. Examples, something that gives better uptime, something that makes your call center operate better, things like that. So there might be an operational component, and that might be, operations is big, right? It could be DevOps too. So there's a lot of different things with operations that you could be considering there. Sales, so something I just kind of touched on. If your phase one isn't something that's sellable, if it's something that your salesperson is going to hesitate in showing people, then you have to start thinking about the sales part of this. In addition to that, if there's market competition for the exact feature that you're doing, and you don't have the bandwidth to have an equivalent of what's in the market out there, you have to start thinking about what can I get my salesperson so that they have something. Next up, support. That's another wing off of operations. But then the second to last one I just want to touch on, the dev team. So how many of you have worked with engineers that want to do something big, like a rewrite of your application, and they keep pitching it, and it never makes it on the roadmap? Okay, I have that daily. So, yeah. So your dev team might be pitching the thing that you need to do, right? And your compromise might be, let's do this in a phased way. I have daily conversations about how to phase the dev team's needs to re-architect the product. And once you go down that path, that's the thing that you're focused on every day, having conversations in if you're in stand-ups, every stand-up that you're doing. then lastly, you have to think about your executive team, making sure that your executive team understands that you're doing a phased approach and not a big bang, that sort of thing.
I thought your example of doing a new feature back end first, so that you can make sure that operations and support and everything continues to work before you actually roll out anything that that's customer facing is very interesting. It's a risk reduction thing.
Well, it's also just, it's kind of like an internal QA process too, without QA touching it. Phase 2 is really when QA is kind of playing with it before we release it to the customer.
Yeah, really good point. Okay, so now I have some slides on best practices, and feel free to stop me as we go. So given those users and those things that you want to do after the phases, like the one that you're talking about, these are some best practices for all the different reasons you might have done a phased approach. So good reason to do a phased approach. And this was the first one that I could think of. If customers desire something huge, and you can't, wait and then just deliver it, a year and a half from now, split it up, because it's huge. So split it up and start to think about it in terms of you're going to do it in increments. So one of the reasons why you do that is you can drive conversation internally, perhaps externally, and acceptance of the plan by putting a roadmap that has phases in front of people. Your conversation of the alternative of I'm going to have a year and a half block of doing something and then it's going to release, that drives the question of why can't it be sooner? If you have a plan in front of them and it says phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, then you can actually, it looks like you've actually thought it through.
You said one thing, perhaps externally.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say definitely externally, because in this approach that we've had, we've had a large customer that we're talking to, and I say, oh, that's great idea, phase 2. Because what you're asking for, we need to be able to show you that this thing works, phase 1, and here's all the plumbing and that. Everything else you're asking for is an add-on. So drawing the line early certainly helps.
Definitely. Establishing that there is a phase 2 means you can have that conversation of, that's in phase 2, right?
I'd suggest 2 other big reasons to do this.
Huh?
One of them is you can deliver some value sooner.
Yes.
Right? I don't know if you may be getting to that slide.
Let's talk about it.
So, if you have a big thing, realistically, a lot of times you can divide that into smaller things and deliver some of, and actually get some value to market faster. It might not be the full thing, but the flip side of that is you can also use this to find out whether it's actually interesting to the market, right? You may have this great idea that everybody says they want, but when you deliver the first bit, you find out, I didn't really want that. It's not as good as I thought it was going to be.
Right.
It's not going to move the needle, and then you can cancel the rest of it without having invested in it. So it's a risk reduction factor as well.
Definitely. Yeah, and if that first phase, and I know you have a second thing.
Well, those are 2.
Oh, that was the 2.
So getting some value to market fast, but also testing the value prop in a sense.
Yeah, if your first phase is not valuable, then you're not going to like what you get back.
Yeah.
You haven't successfully done a phase 1, phase 2 approach. So.
Or you may be getting a different, like your customers are probably not saying, oh, I love this fact that you have this new back end that I can't make any use of, right? But you're learning you've done some risk reduction.
Right.
And prove some things internally.
Yeah.
You can then make use of.
I've got a lot of bugs, actually, so yeah.
So, I don't want to put you on the spot. Alicia, I know that you had.
You don't want to put me on the spot when I'm not listening
I don't want to put.
texting you.
I don't want to put Alicia on the spot. So didn't you have something where your mobile app, it went into a phased approach where the first time when your mobile app was released, you were challenged to have some value there for the customer, and then but you were missing a big thing, but you still had this thing where you needed to provide value in that first phase.
Are you talking about
Digital key and
digital keys?
going to the
and
front
information?
desk.
Yeah, okay. I work for Hilton, so if you haven't stayed with the Hilton in the last 3 years, we've been pushing digital key, which is the ability to use your smartphone to unlock your door instead of having to stop at the door and get a key card. And for the first 2 years when digital key was available, you could only request a key when you did check in before arriving at the hotel. So that was our phase one. We knew that a lot of people were getting to the hotel and seeing other people use it and thinking, oh, that's really cool, I want to try it. But the front desk people had to say, sorry, you can try it on your next day, you can't try it now because you didn't do the process. So our phase two was something called Authenticity Time, which allowed people to actually go to the front desk and say, hey, I want to try that, and now we can push a key to those people. So that's good if you, one, forgot to check in advance, and then you get there and you're like, oh, I wanted it on my phone because I don't want to have to keep up with the key card. And it's also good for the people who weren't early adopters, who weren't like really techie, but see someone else use it, and then like, okay, I want to try it. So that was my example.
Maybe you're about to get to this. The challenge I always run into is defining that phase two, especially when it's a public company. They don't want to promise something that we're not actually going to end up building, or we may change direction based on what happens in phase one. When you get your developers in the room, like you're mentioning before, some of your developers do have those great ideas, and after you listen to that, you realize, yeah, we really should go that direction. There actually is value here. So, then defining your phase two, it needs to be specific enough that it provides a vision, but vague enough that you can still change with the market, right?
Right, right. And would you think that your phase two should be something that that phase one provides feedback on so that you could avoid?
I think that needs to be part of it.
So your riskiest assumptions are in phase two, but maybe you get feedback in phase one. Is that kind of where you were going?
Yeah.
And that can be challenging because you want your phase one to be a full use case, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, phase one should have your MVP features, hopefully enough that your customers are willing to buy into what you are initially developing.
See, that's interesting that you should say that, because we were arguing about this. Whether or not, is an MVP a phase one, or is it an experiment? Because technically with an MVP, you should be willing to scrap it and say it failed and I'm going to do something different.
So it becomes
what do you
really
think
tricky.
about that?
Yeah, it becomes really tricky that you want to have enough value there that it's going to fund phase two or help to fund it, and that you're going to get some customers out of it. In some cases, you may not be able to build enough that they're actually willing to pay for it, and it becomes an experiment, like you say. But hopefully you find something that, like, for additional $5, I'm willing to unlock the door with my phone. Or maybe they said, no, I'm just going to use a room key. Come on. So that becomes part of testing the market, right?
Well, every market introduction is essentially an MVP, where the hypothesis is people will pay for this, right? Earlier MVPs are, I have a hypothesis that somebody will give me their email address if I pitch them this thing, right? Or it might be, blah, 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 right? There's lots of, but even every product is an MVP in the sense that it's testing a hypothesis, which is the market will find this valuable.
Yeah.
Or this new feature, the market will find this valuable.
Right, but if you have absolutely no intention of pulling it down, if people don't find it valuable and you just declare bankruptcy because they did it, like instead of pivoting, is that really an MVP?
Sure. I think technically it is. I don't know if it's useful to call it that. That's the point. But if you're like releasing a new feature as a phase one of a bigger thing, and your hypothesis is this feature, this big thing is interesting, and I can prove that by doing something small or doing something phase one, and then phase one it gets no traction, and you say I'm not going to do the rest of that feature. So that would be an MVP of that. I would say that's. I hate the usage of MVP and all this. Like it means nothing now. The way people use it.
I think you're hitting on something that, and there's a blog post in this somewhere.
Who's gonna write it
I know.
I don't know if it's been coined. I'm going to coin it right now. a pessimistic roadmap versus an optimistic roadmap. So here's my philosophy on the roadmap is the roadmap should tell you that what you're building right now is going to be successful, and then after it's successful, then your next thing that comes after that is how you're going to react to it being successful. Now, if you're doing a pessimistic roadmap, what you're going to do is in Q2 of 2018 is build your mobile app, and in Q3, nothing, right? But if you're doing an optimistic roadmap, it's in Q3, you start on phase 2. We don't know what phase 2 is.
Yeah. I think if you do a theme-based roadmap, then that it works for both.
Yeah.
And particularly if the themes are based on problems that your market has.
Yeah.
So rather than mobile, as the theme, you say, oh, access anywhere.
Yeah.
As the theme or whatever. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's stretching to do that.
Yeah.
But then it goes both ways, right? So we have a theme of access anywhere. Oh, we found out that nobody cares about that, or we found out that the thing we originally thought of was wrong. So we're doing this other thing, but it's still access anywhere. It just phase 2 changed to a different thing than what we originally thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that is a good point. A lot of the thought leadership is to just put themes on your roadmap.
The roadmap is predicting the future. Yeah. And so I know that I personally am not that good at predicting the future, and I challenge, maybe people who use Robinhood are really good at predicting the future. Right, and that's how you get
Not this guy, but...
So if you're really good at predicting the future, you can put whatever you want on the roadmap, but if you're not that good, try not to commit.
Right. Yeah, and some of us, I'm actually interested now that you bring that up. How many I'm assuming most of us are in product management here. How far out do you guys plan?
One sprint at a time, right?
Do you really do one? Do you really do sprints and then you go 6 out or 10 out or something like that?
We do sprints. We usually do about 4 at a time. This project is a little bit different because we're rebuilding something that already exists.
Yeah.
And so the product manager's job is more to point out a few subtle enhancements that we could make or prioritize the order of how we're going to go about this.
Yeah.
So my team came up with a paradigm that we stumbled through it and helped develop it, so I can't even say who created it, but I guess it was a team effort. The roadmap that we do now is we show completed last quarter, we show committed for the next quarter, so we say next quarter we're definitely going to do these things. Then we have considering and conceptualizing. For considering is for the 1 quarter out, and conceptualizing is just a laundry list of stuff that we want to look at more. So that has helped a little bit with getting over okay, you put on a roadmap, you're going to deliver it. Hasn't totally solved the problem, but it's been helpful.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I'd say,
That's the type of approach that I've heard works for people. I try not to put anything on the roadmap. And if I have to, I put it very high level.
Yeah.
But you can't always get away with that, but often you can if you have been doing it long enough.
See, I have to put things on my roadmap in order to maintain them. Putting them on the roadmap means that, then somebody has to think, oh yeah, but he already promised this. And he already showed this to 300 people. So they have to think about that in terms of reputation a little bit. So I like to put things on roadmaps so that I don't lose those things.
Right. No, that makes sense.
You know what I mean?
If you're going to do them,
Yeah.
right, then the problem with the roadmap is not only what you're going to do, but when. And if it's easy to commit to doing something, but it's hard to commit to when you will be done because of physics.
of course, if those themes are tied to quarterly bonus incentives, then it makes things drive a little bit faster sometimes.
Yeah. Then it gets to market, but it's crap when it gets to market.
Right.
So it's not.
That's why you end up with a phased approach.
It's not necessarily an improvement at that point, but.
That's right.
So the thing that I've seen Barry O'Reilly and Marty Kagan both say is you focus on outcomes instead of outputs. I think that's a really nice soundbite,
Yeah.
but getting that to transition to what are we actually building is a little tougher.
It is. I think that all of us are, it's obvious that the 6 of you guys are really good at philosophizing about why to do this in a philosophical kind of way, and that kind of thing. But then actually getting it to split up into dev work and that kind of thing is pretty challenging. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up is that what you're actually doing as well is trying to break up long development cycles and making your dev team more efficient. Because why does the company hire you to be a product manager? One of the main reasons is to make sure that your dev team is efficient and make sure your dev team is happy and that they don't leave your company and that kind of thing. That's never spelled out in your job description, but that's why when you're a product manager and you interview, they have you meet with the dev team and the VP of engineering and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So this is something that you can do so that your dev team like invites you to their weddings and things because they really like you because you've done stuff like that.
Right.
Let me just jump into this one. Okay, we have not talked that much about marketing. So, and I'll go back just a little bit. One of the ways that I've come up with content on this is actually talking to several product managers, including Alicia. Alicia and I kind of did this together a little bit, where we talked to several different product managers. And one of them that we talked to brought this up that I'd never thought of. Your phased approach might be for your dev team, and your marketing approach might not be at the sprint level or the quarterly level. It might be that your marketing launch is longer, and it's more of that big bang kind of thing. Or you could try to keep them in line like that. Yeah. But there could be some kind of separation of the marketing aspect of what you're doing for your phased approach. So, just an idea to think of. I'm going to skip through some of these. I do want to call out, though, that maybe your big thing that you're trying to do is performance or stability or security or something like that. Good idea to try to break those ones up. In fact, that's what my roadmap is right now. The first line is all security things. And it's hard to put security as a theme on your roadmap, but I did that, and people challenged me on that a little bit. But it's a good idea to break up some of these if it's possible as well. Yeah. Because, especially with performance, your phase 1 can be measured because your application is faster or something like that. So you can deliver value fast, with something like performance or stability because you can actually quantify it after you do that. A couple more things that you can do that are reasons why to do a phased approach. Third-party software integrations. In my experience, when you're dealing with another company that's building an API for you and you're integrating with them, that lends itself really well to a phased approach, talking to that other company. Giving them a deadline, giving them more deadlines is probably good. And so I've actually experienced that this is a good reason to do that. Another thing, rolling out a feature geographically or something. So you do something for Canada, and then phase 2, your next quarter, you start to do it for Australia, and maybe you scrap the whole thing because it doesn't work for Canada or something like that. So that's a good one where you can do it. So let's talk about why not to use a phased approach. I only have like 3 slides. Can you guys all stay a couple more minutes? Nobody has a session that's beginning in 10 minutes, right? Okay, good. Major UI changes or site relaunches. So I was talking to Alicia last night, and we were like, can you think of anything where like a website, a public-facing website was there was a rebrand, or it started to really, started to do something completely different on a redesign, and then half of the website was still the old design. And I couldn't think of any examples actually, but can any of you guys think of examples of site relaunches or major UI changes like Facebook, LinkedIn, or something where it's halfway there and they tried to do this and it...
Well, my last product did that.
Yeah.
We had a major UI change, and the approach we took, we couldn't do the whole app at once, but we did the major parts of it.
Yeah.
Like the 6 major modules, and we didn't do some of the other modules, either because we were going to rewrite them anyway, because they were old and didn't work very well, or they were the admin things that not everybody was going to see every day. And so even that was a phase, but the problem with doing it that way was just the part that we rewrote was 6 months of all developers. So no other features, basically no other features happened during that period.
Right.
It was all rewriting.
Yeah.
And so, if we could have phased, it would have been really nice. But yeah, we sort of had that conclusion is that we couldn't phase it, except in this very gross way. The one thing I have seen is when you use an approach where you might send a segment of customers to the new thing and leave a segment on the old thing. So it's in a sense the rollout is phased,
right,
even if the development sort of all has to be done in order to start the rollout.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I've seen Facebook and Amazon do a little bit, but they're not like major redesigns
hard
by
to
any means.
notice,
But
right?
like you notice some buttons or UI elements have a slightly newer design versus other parts of pages have a older design, and so I think that's kind of how they've done it. Like even like one of the menus on the mobile app, for example, just got updated. But
I think LinkedIn did that a couple of years ago, where they had the desktop experience at one point was totally different than the mobile. When they rolled out something on one versus the other, it was like, I don't have this feature, I have it on my desktop.
Right. LinkedIn's definitely guilty of this. Salesforce is guilty of this. Massive organizations that we generally dislike are guilty of this, right? So, okay. Here's another one. Another reason not to do it. If the culture of your organization is such that they're a little too comfortable with phase 2, like the example that was given that you're talking to people and you're like, phase 2, phase 2. If that's something where that is culturally ingrained and phase 2 is always the answer to everything, I would be pretty hesitant to say, we're going to do a phase 1, phase 2 approach, because you're going to end up with everything pushed to phase 2. So, and that's a challenging one because you can't change who's been hired by your organization to accommodate your phased approach. So I would be a little nervous about that kind of example. Here's another one about the value that is added when a phase isn't justifiable on its own. If you roll out your phase 1 and it's just not viable. And phase 1 is just something that doesn't really get you to your core goal in the first place. It's just a really small step, and it's perhaps smaller than an MVP or right at an MVP level.
The Robinhood Bitcoin example kind of seems that way to me.
It does, doesn't it?
What the hell? It's annoying.
it feels more like a marketing/growth-driven thing than a product-driven thing.
Yeah.
Right?
What's a me too, right? Oh, Bitcoin's cool, let's get something on there real quick so we can say we're out there.
But they do that kind of rollout, I think, for other features they've launched as well, so it's part of their...
And actually, that gets into this one, which is my last slide. So you can come on up. And that is, you can't use that Bitcoin feature that I showed you guys until both of the phases are complete.
Right.
So that's why they shouldn't have done it that way. Of course, they're really successful, so they seem to be doing things the right way anyway. But clearly, that was a main reason not to do that. So just as we close up here, questions, comments before we let you guys go to your next sessions?
I was just thinking that Disneyland is a place where they do this quite well, where they roll out a ride. It may not take off because people who ride it think it's great, so that they rebrand it under different characters. Or another one was Rocket Rods, where they killed it after phase 1,
Yeah. Yeah, those are good examples. So I think your session's on IoT, right?
Yes.
So Internet of Things session is right now, and I know Niels has a session this afternoon, so you guys should go to that, and Alicia probably has one as well. So thanks all for coming, and
Thanks, Matt.
appreciate your time.